I recently read the book When McKinsey Comes to Town. It is an expose and critique of how McKinsey and Company does business. McKinsey and Company are a very large and prestigious consulting company. They go hire the very top graduates from Harvard and Cambridge and Stanford and all the top schools. And then they put those consultants, their new employees, on projects for very large companies like Walmart and General Electric and Disney. And these consultants go and analyze this large company, and they say, well, here are your strengths, here are your weaknesses, here are people you should hire and roles you should hire, here are people you should fire, here are products you should introduce, here are locations you should open, here are other companies you should buy, here are companies you should sell. So McKinsey does all the analysis, and sometimes they actually do the implementation, meaning they build the project or team that's needed in order to accomplish what that large company wants to accomplish. And this is true for all large consulting companies: KPMG, Capgemini, Pricewaterhouse, Deloitte, all the really big companies. And so this book really attacks McKinsey in ways that I found to be unfair. The first thing it does is it criticizes McKinsey for the people it chooses to do business with. Like, McKinsey has worked for alcohol distributors and worked for tobacco companies and big energy and chemical companies. And yeah, I agree. I mean, are those companies a net benefit to society? I mean, maybe, maybe not. But I have been a consultant for many decades, and I have also worked for chemical companies and casinos, very large casino organizations, and tobacco companies. And I don't smoke, and I don't gamble, and I try to limit my alcohol. And I agree that maybe alcohol and gambling and smoking are a challenging thing that society faces, but those companies are legally operating within the framework society has set up for it. And as a consultant, my job is not to moralize. It is very easy to moralize in this world. Everybody with a Twitter account is moralizing and talking about what they would do different or how terrible other people are. The flaws of society are not going to be solved by criticism and complaining. The flaws of society are going to be solved by action. And that is the second problem I have with this book, and that is the entirety of the book is one giant complaint about how McKinsey does business. But at no point in the book do they say, here's how you legitimately do business. Here's how you legitimately consult. Here's how you legitimately work with your customers. And the reality is, like, when does the judgment end, right? Like, I've worked for large airlines before. Those airlines burn fossil fuels, but everybody uses them when they need to go see their family or go travel the world, right? I've worked for big Hollywood companies before, several big Hollywood companies, and everybody is critical of them about the violence and the tragedy and the profiting off of other people in Hollywood. But I don't see anybody stopping and watching movies, right? So we can't just criticize McKinsey for their customer choices, and we can't criticize them for legitimately helping those customers be more effective at the roles that they're in. If we need to do big societal change, we probably need to look at how we vote, and we probably need to take strong action politically in order to reform society and to be something better. But the reality is, society is highly consumeristic. We consume, we consume, we consume. And as long as that is true, we're going to have very large companies take advantage of that. That's just the reality. Now, if I were to write a book about my criticisms about big consulting and the way large companies employ big consultants, my criticisms were in no way covered in this book, When McKinsey Comes to Town. What I would criticize is the fact that, one, companies often hire consultants because the consultants have skills that they don't have. And to me, that's a cop-out. To me, if your company needs critical skills, then you need to develop those skills internally and develop your own talent pool and not rely on consulting to do that for you, because the consultants might quit. The consultants might take the talent that you paid for and go work for your competitors. They do that. I know they do that. The consultants might advertise critical things about your company because they learned it while they were working for you. The second reason why companies hire consultants is because there's too much bureaucracy in hiring and firing people. And it's cheaper to just say, hey, McKinsey, hey, KPMG, hey, Capgemini, you do this work because it's hard for us to hire. And then when we need to fire, it's hard for us to fire. And or maybe even worse, when we fire people, we have to go tell Wall Street that we fired somebody. And we don't want to tell Wall Street that, right? So we just like to hire consulting because when we fire consultants, we don't have to tell anybody that, right? To me, that is a bigger symptom. Solve your bureaucratic problems, solve those problems, and then hire and fire like you're supposed to be doing. Don't just pawn off your responsibility on consultants. And then the third reason why they hire consultants is companies hire consultants because they have weak managers that want something to blame when their ideas go wrong. So a manager or leader says, we need to open up a new store or open up or acquire a whole new business. They hire McKinsey. McKinsey does all the analysis. And then at the end of it, McKinsey says, yes, you should acquire that business. The leader does that. And then when it all goes wrong, the leader just says, well, I just did what McKinsey told me to do, right? That's laziness. We call that in consulting getting air cover, right? And it's inappropriate. And what we really need is corporate leaders that have backbones that will take ownership of their decisions, that will do their own research, that will follow the evidence, that will pay attention and be observant, and at the end of the day, act. And no matter how it turns out, they will live with the consequences of those actions instead of using air cover. And those are my criticisms about consulting. But as far as who McKinsey did business with, the only legitimate complaints I have is that McKinsey was hyper involved in opiate crisis of the last decade. The second real criticism that I have is McKinsey, and I know they did this, they published a list of all the top executives and their compensation. And what that did was every executive wanted to be on that list. And in this country, executive compensation went from 30 times the average employee's salary to 400 times the average employee's salary. And a critical component on why that was the McKinsey list, basically promoting the momentum of executives getting more and more money so that they could brag that they're on the list and they're so smart and so good. And that's why we get, hundreds of millions of dollars a year in compensation packages for these executives. And I think that's inappropriate. I think it's morally wrong. That won't stop me from consulting with them. I wish it was different. But again, moral judgment and criticism is easy. Action and solutions and building and constructive work is very difficult. And this book offered none of that. And that's why, I largely thought this was a waste of time. Anyway, there's my review of When McKinsey Comes to Town. Thanks. Have a great day.